All right, we're going to be talking about solving a formula for a specific variable. Now, this is where you're going to be given some sort of formula, and you're just basically solving it for one variable in there. And there's a couple things going on with this, but the main thing to remember is formulas are just equations, and you can use your same tools for solving equations. So the thing to remember when you're solving equations, you've usually got two or three different steps, but you start with doing things like adding or subtracting. So let's take the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle. If I've got a rectangle, the distance around, I've got my width, I've got the length. So if I were figuring out the distance around, I'd have the width plus the length plus the width plus the length, or my distance around would be, I would say that my perimeter would be 2w plus 2l is equal to my perimeter. But now let's say I want to solve this for w. Say I want to figure out what that width is. Well, first thing that we're going to do with this formula is we're going to add or subtract so we can isolate this variable on this side, or this variable term. I should be a little bit more specific. So I've got 2w plus 2l is equal to p, and I would just subtract 2l from both sides. And when I do that, 2l minus 2l is 0. So I've got 2w is equal to, well, these, even though these are both, they're both variables, these are not like terms. I've got a p, I've got an l. So these can't go together. It's just going to be p minus 2l. And then we still need to get just that w by itself. So I'm going to divide. So in this case, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And sure enough, I've just got w by itself right here. And now I've got p minus 2l over 2. And I could leave it here. That would be fine. It's okay to have a formula that looks like this. But I know some folks who don't like this. I don't want you to try to do something like cancel those things out. If you remember, this entire numerator is divided by 2. So if you don't want an expression that looks like this, we could in fact take another half a step here and say, okay, well, I want this to look a little bit different. I'll do w is equal to p over 2 minus that 2l over 2. And now I can reduce that. So essentially all I'm doing is like I say, everything up here is divided by 2. So now I'm just breaking it up into two separate things. So I would have w is equal to p over 2 minus l. So either of these answers will work. Now, this one is a fairly straightforward example, but most of what we did here was just adding or subtracting. Let's show you another type of example that you're going to run into. Let's show you another type of formula that you'll see. And here is the formula for the volume of an upright cylinder. So this would have a height h, radius of r, and the volume of an upright cylinder is pi r squared h. That's an r right here. Now, say I want to solve this for h. Now remember, our first step before was add or subtract. but I am not, there's nothing I could subtract from both sides that would make this any different. What, so I don't need to add or subtract, but what I can do is I can divide. And what I'm going to divide by is going to be everything else attached to that h. I want h by itself, so, let's just divide it all away. But whatever I do to one side, I do the same thing to the other. So I'm going to divide both sides by pi and r squared. And sure enough, pi over pi, that's equal to 1. R squared divided by itself is 1. So I'm left with h alone by itself on one side. I've isolated the variable. And over here on the left, I've got v over pi r squared. So that's how we can solve something like this. One last example where I'm going to do both types of things. And we're going to do a little bit of this later on. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one particular example. And this is what we call the general formula for a line. Let's say I've got ax plus by is equal to c. And this time I'm going to solve for y. So we do in fact need to isolate this term. So I'm going to start by adding or subtracting. It doesn't matter which side this by ends up on. So I'm just going to go ahead and take anything that isn't y, this by term, away. I'll have minus ax. Okay. Well, sure enough, I've got by, as ax minus ax is 0, is equal to c minus ax. So we've added or subtracted. We've isolated that y term. Now I'm going to divide. So let's go ahead and divide. I'm going to divide both sides by b. And now I've got my y by itself. I've got c minus ax over b. If I don't like that form, once again, I can split this up. I can divide both of these terms in my numerator by my denominator. So I could say this is y is equal to c over b minus ax over b. There's another way that we're going to see this later, so I'll put this in here just for completion. A lot of times you'll see these two things written a different way. You'll usually see this like minus a over b x plus that c over b. All three of these are saying the same thing. Alrighty. That's what we have for that particular topic. I'll see you in the next video.